Baldur's Gate 3 is supposed to be a game about being an adventurer or a wizard who seeks out the next challenge. However, recently, it's been turned into a fantasy version of The Sims 4, where people spend more time making their character and focusing on romancing NPCs. That's why today we're taking back Baldur's Gate for the gamers by playing on the hardest difficulty in the game, Honor Mode. This means that dying is permanent and the campaign is over, and there's no reloading the game if you get stuck in a tough spot. But let's put the doom and gloom aside and start making a character. Meet Cumman, a level 1 warlock halfling who's covered in the blood of his enemies as well as some other fluids. If you've never played this game before, essentially we used to be just a random citizen of the world before we were kidnapped and probed by aliens. Not that kind of probing. Instead, they just put a brain-eating parasite in our heads, which would normally turn us into a great flying squid, but for some reason it doesn't. For now, we've woken up on the alien ship and decided to explore. We quickly ran into someone named Lizelle, who seems to have also been kidnapped and probed by the aliens. Unfortunately for her, she violates one of the extra rules that we've given ourselves. This is going to be a 2-man campaign with only myself and my friend Kyr. All other NPCs will be killed or abandoned, and none are allowed to stay in our camp. This means that Lizelle was quickly forced to meet a short end as soon as she attempted to join our squad. Shortly after that, you push deeper into the alien ship where you would normally find Shadowheart. However, my friend Kyr is actually playing as Shadowheart to have access to her questline as well as some cleric spells like Sanctuary and Command Drop. Command Drop can be very helpful to use on the demon in the next fight, because you don't actually have to complete this fight at all. You can steal his flaming sword and leave as soon as you touch the console back there. However, we got a little greedy and thought we could kill the demon to get some free early game XP. This was a mistake. I quickly found myself dying on the floor, and not long after, Kyr was put in the same position, meaning that we would get to see this screen for the first time, but it wouldn't be the last time. Neither would be the next one or the one after that. It wasn't until our 4th try that things were going better, and Cumman was able to grab the ship's controls and crash it into the nearest landmass. After waking up from the crash, you can explore the beach, fight some brains, and even meet some new NPCs, Astarion and Gale. To avoid the risk of them trying to join our party, I opted to kill them. Astarion only has 10 health and is pretty easy to kill, but Gale is a little more tricky. Due to his medical condition, he lives a volatile life and could explode the universe at any time, even if he's dead. That's right, we killed Gale, and 3 days later, we were awoken to this cutscene that I have never seen before. And just like that, our 4th try was also over. Having learned from our mistakes, Cumman returned once again, this time making sure to rip off Gale's hand and leave him in his dimension to die. After that, we approached a nearby druid camp that was getting overrun by goblins. Apparently, these attacks are frequent and are causing some strife within the camp between the druids and the tieflings. Normally I would ask, who cares? But as the hero of this story, I guess we do, which means that the responsibility has fallen on us to kill these goblins. But even heroes have to train, which means fighting bugbears, skeletons, and even ogres. Or maybe you try to get stronger by recruiting allies to help you. Oh wait, we can't do that. So maybe you get stronger by decapitating your allies then. Either way, the goal of all this training is to level up and gain new skills. But keep in mind that the skills you pick are very important, as they're permanent. Because, like I said earlier, no NPCs are allowed in our camp, which includes withers. Technically, you can't stop withers from coming to your camp, but we're refusing to play with them this run. Once we were feeling strong enough, we decided to head to the goblin camp and run in guns a-blazing. Once you kill the guards by the gate, you can approach the inner part of the goblin camp, which is connected by a bridge that you can easily use to your advantage if you filter enemies into a cloud of daggers, resulting in probably the easiest combat ever, as well as some quick XP. All that was left was the inside of the goblin temple. In here, there are basically 3 bosses that you have to defeat in order to stop the goblins: Jorragslin, Priestess Gut, and Minthara. We started off fighting Priestess Gut. As a warlock, this meant basically using every turn to cast Eldritch Blast, which was great at destroying the priestess's mind, as well as knocking Jorragslin into the spider pit. Meanwhile, Kyr was providing Sanctuary to preserve our rather small life totals. But that's not all, because Kyr had also discovered a new favorite pastime, which was collecting every smoke powder bomb in the game and throwing them at NPCs. Like I said, this was Kyr's new favorite activity, and we used it to clear some combats before even entering them. But with the goblins defeated, the druids informed us that the tieflings would be leaving for Baldur's Gate. Even though it felt great to help solve their problem, it still left us with a brain-eating parasite and no answers, which meant that we had to keep on exploring the area looking for leads. This somehow led us hundreds of feet underground, where we got ambushed by some of the locals in an abandoned town. We killed them and stole their boat. This was of course a horrible idea, as people immediately recognized the stolen boat, but didn't recognize us. Luckily, a little lying can always get you out of a tough spot in life. After getting off the boat, we learned of this huge base that was being set up down here, and the tunnels that they were digging to expand it. One of such tunnels had recently collapsed and was risking the life of their leader. After blasting the rubble and freeing him, you find out that Kyr is kind of an asshole to his people, which is why we teamed up with him to fight everyone else. With Sanctuary active on Kyr and myself, it meant all the workers would do the heavy lifting, taking his health down for us before finally putting an arrow in his chest. Unfortunately, this still didn't help us out much on our quest of removing the brain parasite, which meant we were back on the road soon after, before entering a very dark territory full of some very interesting individuals. One of such individuals was Ketheric Thorm, a local god of the sorts, who controls this area and appears to be immortal. Upon further investigation, you find out his immortality is tied to a secret tool hidden in the nearby Temple of Shar, where a man named Balthazar has been put in charge. Luckily, if you cast Knock, you can force Balthazar to join the combat, where he gets shot by all the skeleton guards outside. So, while we sat back with Sanctuary on, the guards did the heavy lifting for us. This meant we were able to freely explore the temple until we found the source of Ketheric's invincibility in the form of a woman he had trapped in his basement. After freeing this woman, it was made pretty clear that Ketheric was a bad man, and needed to be taken out of this world. Plus, maybe we would get some answers about our brainworms along the way. But it turns out without his immortality, Ketheric is kind of a little bitch, and runs away at the smallest inconvenience. So after taking care of the lackeys he left behind, we chased after him, jumping feet first into the disgusting pit of flesh. After walking around in his flesh dungeon, you eventually come across the coward himself. Only this time he's joined by two other cowards, Gortash and Orin, who must have seen us coming and decided to leave Ketheric to fight us off alone. Even though our characters were pretty high level, as a warlock I still really only knew one thing, which was Eldritch Blast. And despite it doing only 7 damage, or just flat out missing half the time, it was still enough to take care of the first phase of Ketheric. But there was no shot that this would be enough for the second phase. We were going to have to go back to the old ways. The only ways that Kyr knows how to play this game. Okay, so apparently that only tickled him. And unfortunately, the explosions wouldn't be enough to kill him. But it was enough to kill his brain cells. Whatever we did to him had ruined his ability to do anything. Every time it got to his turn, he would just sit there staring at us and refuse to make any moves or attacks until eventually passing his turn, meaning we were able to just bully him to death, which was great. But on the flip side, defeating Ketheric Thorm meant that Dame Aelin would want to join our party permanently. This of course would not be tolerated, but for now had to be put on the back burner because something even more pressing was about to happen. See, in the middle of the night we were ambushed and taken to another dimension to have a discussion with a Mind Flayer. He claims to be the person who protects us from turning into a flying squid, and is the reason that our brainworm isn't like everyone else's. Given this information, it only made sense to team up with him and fight the Githyanki that were trying to kill him. But this is when we found out that the Emperor is one of the worst partners in combat ever. His favorite thing to do was get opportunity attacked. He would even fly into someone just so he could walk away, triggering an opportunity attack. Even if you gave him Sanctuary, he would make sure to break it before moving away from the target, just to make sure he could get attacked. And he wouldn't even fly far enough away to not get attacked. He was literally just throwing away our entire game and this entire combat, because the Emperor isn't like other NPCs in this game, where you can just behead them and ignore their quest. No, despite everything we did to try and save the Emperor, he still got killed by the Githyanki, which means that he can no longer protect you from the brainworm. And without his protection, you're forced to become a gross squid person who worships the giant brain in charge, meaning your game is over. This was heartbreaking. We were inches away from reaching Act 3, the final part of the game, and we had already died 4 other times and had been working on this challenge for the past month. But just like that, it was gone. Until a couple days later, when Kyr and I reconvened and reassessed our gameplay. Being Shadowheart wasn't really helpful, and being a halfling warlock was basically the worst thing I've ever done. So Come Man was abandoned in favor of a level 1 druid named the Commoner. And just like that, we were off once again, catching back up to our previous selves and jumping into the fleshy pit. Except by now, I was a level 9 druid, with adamantine heavy armor, a big shield, and over 100 health. Not to mention that I had 14 spell slots, ranging all the way up to level 5, compared to my pitiful warlock who had 5 spell slots, and only went up to level 2. We had finally made it all the way back to Ketheric again, another 30-something hours down the drain, but at least this time we were much stronger. Although, to be honest, it didn't change the fight that much. Kyr was still addicted to finding as many bombs as possible and putting them at Ketheric's feet before almost crashing the game, as well as my graphics card. And very soon, we were unfortunately back to being the Emperor's bodyguards. Although, this time he seemed to play nice, deciding to actually do stuff and not walk into danger. The Githyanki must have seen his changed behavior and knew they didn't stand a chance, as they chose to explode themselves rather than participate in the fight, which meant that we were finally free, and could enter Act 3. It had been weeks, but during this time we had changed and grown, and we were finally back to where we were before, and the rules remained the same, which means that I have to address the issue with Dame Aylin. Luckily, there's a man in Baldur's Gate named Leroican, who claims to have the ability to once again imprison her, which is morally wrong, but legally right considering our rules. However, the devs of this game must have decided that this was the extremely morally wrong thing to do, because this is probably one of the hardest fights in the game. If you try to turn in Dame Aylin, she gets to summon 3 level 11 angels that each have 260 health. They also make her invulnerable, and can deal 12 to 144 damage to you as a reaction if you ever hit them. This means that you would have to completely kill all the angels in one massive attack before they got the chance to respawn. But that would require something crazy, something massive, capable of dealing hundreds of damage all at once. Something like, I don't know, 50 smoke powder bombs? Yeah, that never gets old. Anyways, with her angel bodyguards gone, the night song died to a simple cool breeze, and we were back on our way, properly following the rules. With Ketheric already dead, that leaves only Gortash and Orin as obstacles in our way to curing ourselves of these brainworms. We decided to focus on Gortash first, since he would be the harder of the two to kill. This is because he gets to hide behind his 8-foot tall robots that have 200-something health. To combat this, we went and investigated the factory where these robots were made, looking for some weakness to exploit. Instead, we found a bunch of gnomes that were being enslaved by this goofy-ass Crash Bandicoot gem. Honestly, I don't even know what the gem does, because according to the game, I'm too stupid to know what it does. All I know is everyone exploded as soon as I touched it. Well, everyone except this blind guy, who seems convinced that his entire race was dead except for him. Despite that, he still pledged to help us destroy the Steel Watch. All we had to do was reach the main control room, where we had to defeat an even bigger and stronger 4-legged robot. Except when I went to go tell the blind man the good news, my character tripped and shot him in the teeth. With him dead, there was nothing we could do to stop the Steel Watch, but it wasn't necessarily over yet. It just meant that fighting Gortash would be more difficult, so we decided to focus on Orin instead, while we figured out a game plan for Gortash. With Kyr playing as a Dark Urge, Scaleratus Fell led us into Orin's lair with no issues. And in fact, Orin even makes the fight easier by swearing off her minions and engaging in an old-school one-on-one fight against Kyr. But after immediately putting Kyr down to 0 health, triggering the Light of Lathander revive, I had to get in the mix and try to save it. Unfortunately, this was just too little too late. Kyr ended up burning to death, and I started to run away, which is when I got cursed with Baal's Edict. Here I was, hundreds of feet away from the combat, and now I was forced to kill someone by the end of my turn, or die. And since Kyr was already dead, this meant that my next moves would be crucial. Kyr and I had debated what to do for a long time. To my right was a guy with only 36 health. I could take a potion of speed and hit him for 5 to 50 damage twice, but it only had a 70% chance to hit. On top of that, I'd have to deal at least 20 damage with each attack, which was in the upper range of the spell's damage. Altogether, I had maybe a 30% chance to save the run. Or there was Kyr's idea. A small child named Yenna that Orin tries to sacrifice in the cutscene, who only has 6 health. Almost any spell would kill her, and technically this would count as killing a creature. Since this seemed like the safer choice, I decided to go with it, fireballing the table in the middle of the combat, only to find out that Yenna is invincible or something. If you look closely, she takes 36 damage, which is enough to kill her, but also simultaneously heals to full. Having wasted one of my precious actions, it was basically over. I tried my best to kill the original guy with 36 health, but even after blasting him with literal rays of sunlight, and enchanting him with necrotic spores, he too healed back to full, dooming our save to eternity in the garbage bin. All I could do was pass my turn and watch the game over screen appear. And just like that, another run was down the drain, and dozens of hours had gone to waste. But there was no time to wallow. We were so close, and I knew for a fact that we could do it. All we needed was the Commoner 2.0. And after just a couple more weeks of grinding, I got my chance to apologize to the blind man for my previous actions, which meant that he was more than happy to help us destroy the Steelwatch facility, weakening Gortash's position. Given how perilous these runs had been going lately, we didn't want to take any chances fighting Gortash's lackeys, so we went invisible and approached him directly. We also used his padded sofas in the lounge to build up a barricade at the entrance, honestly not expecting it to do much, but just hoping for the best. Then entered turn-based mode and hit him with a couple moonbeams before actually triggering the combat. Once it did start, Gortash attacked us immediately, and we hid in a corner behind an invincible shield. Meanwhile, the guards he left behind in the previous room had been completely dumbfounded by our couches. The enemies would just do nothing and pass their turns, at one point resorting to shooting each other before figuring out that they could shoot the sofas instead. This gave us plenty of time to ping down Gortash until he finally took an arrow to the knee. With Gortash and Ketheric killed, this left us with only one remaining boss, Orin, the same person who had ended our run just a couple weeks ago, but she would not get that chance again, for she has forgotten about Kyr's trademark combat move, Smoke Powder. After engulfing her in explosions, a simple magic missile would finish the job off. And now that we had defeated all three of the Chosen Ones, we could finally get some answers on how to deal with our brainworms. According to the Mind Flayer who was protecting us, we would be able to overcome the worms once and for all if we used all of our Crash Bandicoot crystals to dominate the brain that was controlling us, which is when Kyr passed every single check. Never in my life have I even seen half of these cutscenes. Usually I pass like one of the checks, and the last one is a 99 check. But with all the buffs that Kyr had and some saved up inspiration, we passed every single check and dominated the brain. Despite this, the Mind Flayer still pulls you into another dimension and claims that we were gonna die anyways. Apparently, only he is strong enough to properly do it, which means we had to hand over the gems to him before he took us to the final battleground, where I was greeted with the saddest final cutscene I've ever seen. Normally, you get to see all the people you helped out and befriended here across the run, but instead, Bjorn is hyping us up and talking about our allies, while the camera pans over to a bunch of empty chairs. After hanging out with literally nobody, we went invisible and made our way up to the Netherbrain's stem. There was really no reason to participate in these fights anyways since we were already level 12. Once we climbed the brain's nasty little spine, we found ourselves on top of it, facing a massive dragon. In classic Kyr fashion, the dragon was forced to eat about 100 bombs. That, plus a wall of fire, some lightning, and a couple magic missiles later, meant that we were down to just us and the brain. With Sanctuary and a Dome of Invulnerability, it was pretty easy for the Emperor to dominate the brain, allowing us to enter the portal to the inner brain. Once in there, we used a couple high-level Scorching Rays to lower the brain's health before ultimately resorting to our caveman ways. Another stack of smoke powder bombs meant that the brain didn't stand a chance against us, and we were finally able to relinquish control over all the Mind Flayers in the city, killing them where they stood. I told the Emperor to leave me alone, and Kyr lost an argument with the God of Death, before getting turned into a ball. After that, we got to enjoy a massive feast with all of our friends. But just like that, we had finally done it. We had finally beaten the game on honor mode, as you can see here. Not only that, but we did it with just the two of us. No help from NPCs, no reloading, and no respecking. Which means that now when I play the game, I get to roll a fancy little gold dice. I hope you enjoyed this challenge and liked the video. You can suggest other challenges in the comments, or subscribe and watch me play other games. But for now, thanks for watching, and have a great day.